let's just start with that. What Brad was mentioning was how things are changing next year, the House settlement. There's still a lot to be determined. Basically, what they've done so far, and you can elaborate on this, is that there's kind of a framework in place that's been agreed upon by the NCAA's legal counsel, by the conferences, but there's a federal judge in the Northern California District Court that has to sign off on this and approve everything that's been agreed upon.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, we're all, to various degrees, love to plan and know what's happening. The toughest part of this situation right now is that we don't know what we don't know. As Matt mentioned, there was an agreement between the conferences, between the NCAA, and put forward to the court of a settlement of the House settlement case. So schools, conferences are moving forward towards that. It has not been approved to this point. That would have to be approved. And there are also some challenges to that from various venues. So, again, looking forward, we're already looking forward to what that will look like next year. What that includes is, a revenue allocation from schools to student athletes. In some regard, a revenue share is another way to put it. So all of those things, that's not going to take NIL away. That will still be around and potentially in the settlement. But those are the moving parts, Matt, that I think people, our coaches, our staff, are staying in tune with, but a lot yet to be determined.
I think the big thing to understand is that NIL is no longer going to be, at least in some of the bigger sports, it's not going to be the primary way that you compensate the athletes. It's going to be something that supplements what they're able to get through revenue share.
Yeah, again, I think some people have deemed it the end of NIL, and I don't think that's it. But there is an opportunity for an institution. For instance, right now, the university, I cannot contribute, I don't know if as a university athletic employee, to NIL efforts. So the institution, even to the degree that employees can't give NIL money directly to student athletes or participate in Arkansas Edge or some of the other venues out there. I think what you're seeing is it's going to kind of go towards more of the institution can be involved. Really, in intercollegiate athletics, as a department, we're involved in almost every aspect of the student-athlete experience. And then they took this big piece called NIL and said, hey, but that's totally separate. Well, that's a big totally separate. So I think you'll see it come back more in. How the university can be involved in that in some way is still to be worked out.
One more for you, just because it came from the gallery, Brad. We didn't plan to talk about this, but like we were talking to Dave Van Horn the other day, and you're the baseball sport admin. They've got 51 players on campus right now to go through fall practice. If this proposal is approved, they can't have more than 34 players on the roster next year. Now, there's some stuff to work out about, like how many. Maybe you can have more on the fall roster. I don't know if that'll work out or not. But it's hard for your coaches right now to plan. And these men and women, they're planners. It's hard for them to plan for what's coming even in 10, 11 months.
Well, you take a look at all the other things. Like I said, the transfer portal, more student athletes coming in for a year or two. They're projecting out for their rosters. They're trying to allocate scholarships that are available. So in the case of baseball, the scholarship limit will go up. Dave will have more scholarships to work with, but the roster limit, because really, if you increased and you had unlimited scholarships or up to a number, and then you had an unlimited roster, that's not a feasible thing. So I think what you're seeing, though, is some adjustment, and that's the hardest thing, is to not think of it the way that we've thought of it before. So yes, in some ways, baseball will benefit from these things, but he's probably going to go into future seasons with a smaller roster than he's been accustomed to.
Before we get going with some of the stuff I wrote down, I will say this about Kevin. I've got a great deal of admiration for Kevin, a lot of respect for what he does. He was the first person who I spoke to when I came to cover a Razorback football event 22 years ago. And that's a good. He is a good front door to have to the university, a great ambassador for the U of A. So I just wanted to say that. You mentioned, or Chip mentioned, all these different boards and different.
I'm really bored. Yeah, I'm on a lot of boards.
These different, just the different roles you have. Yeah. One that I know is real important to you right now, you're the president of the College Sports Communicators, used to be called COSIDA. Tell us about that and why you wanted to sit in this role and what you think you can accomplish.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I do have the honor to be the College Sports Communicators president. It's an organization of more than 4,400 sports communicators across the country and Canada. It's an organization that was important to me in my young career and professional development. And, I really believe that there were so many people that invested in me and invested in my professional growth and personal growth that it's important to give back. And so it's an honor to serve as the president of our organization. We do have a full-time staff that works day to day, but the president goes and really tries to galvanize the organization. And these are sports communicators, much like a lot of things in intercollegiate athletics. They're long hours, just like our journalist friends here. Long hours, long days. The pay is not anywhere near some of the other individuals you're working with in that regard, but it is a passion and it's very important because at the end of the day, while a lot of things have changed, communicating and telling the story of, in this case, Razorback Athletics or whatever programs they're involved in is key to publicizing those student athletes, to publicizing those programs. So, but it's been an honor to serve. I serve until the next convention, but we're really looking to do some things. Again, same questions that Brad asked. How do we serve our institutions? How do we serve our conferences in this time of crisis? And I've said college sports communicators are well adept to that. We're used to changes. Coaches, student athletes, things change all the time, so we want to help lead in this time of uncertainty.
As president, do they stand when you walk in the room?
I was waiting for my presidential motorcade, and it ended up being my car, and I drove myself. So somebody asked me if I had an entourage, and I said no. I don't. My dog didn't even want to come today, I don't think.
We saw in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, a pretty drastic change in how the people who are on your side do things. I mean, you were a sports information director for a lot of years. In the old days, the sports information directors, and I may be undervaluing what you did, but it was really about being a liaison with the media, being a record keeper, those types of deals. It's really changed, though, in the last decade or so. You've got the social media element. You've got so much more that these men and women who are in this profession are doing. How has the role changed, and how do you see it changing moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great point. So much has changed in the time when I entered this business. I remember standing, out at the end of football practice, and you were dealing with maybe 5 to 6 media members, and they were filing for the newspaper that was going to go to press later that night, and TV stations were filing for the 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock news, and so everything was kind of built towards that. You were working towards that. Now you're living in a 24-hour news cycle 7 days a week. And with that are opportunities. We have opportunities, and you mentioned your podcast. You mentioned all the social elements, social media elements. There's always news, and the great thing about Arkansas fans, they're always thirsting for news. With that, though, comes some changes in how you go about that and how you can communicate. And so it's really been adapting to that, learning what our traditional media friends, what they need. Their needs are changing. And so there have been things that come up. I remember when the most important thing in the world was to have enough phones in the press box so people could file their stories, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a hardline phone in that press box anymore, right? The biggest catastrophe, other than running out of some food and drink, no, I'm just kidding, is Wi-Fi. Clearly, that's the lifeline of what everyone's doing. So I think adapting with it and learning how to communicate in this. And guess what? Every one of those student athletes walks out. They can sit in front and talk to a press conference, and guess what? They walk out with a device that can communicate over the world. There are a few players, I won't name any names, Jeb wasn't one of them, but I would have been scared having social media back in the day within loose. But that's part of it. And we've got student athletes that have grown up in the spotlight, just personally. And so all of that comes into play now when you're managing the situation.
A lot of years ago, and I think I've shared this with you, that you gave good advice to a class of mine that you were speaking to, and you were talking about the role of your role and how you deal with the media. And you said, we've got a great relationship, and this is great advice for any business I think that you're in, but there are going to be times where what my job is and what your job is are going to conflict, and we have to be okay with that. I just wonder, though, if you'll talk about dealing with media and kind of maybe how that's changed.
Sure, and I honestly believe that, and I've always tried to do this. My mentors have said it all comes down to a relationship business, and we won't go through all the difficult things and the tough moments that I've had to deal with in my day. But in those key moments when you're dealing with media members, people that are trying to do their job, you're trying to do their job. If you haven't built that relationship, it's too late. And so I think being able to be as transparent as you can of what you can and can't say, what you can and can't do. But yes, there are times where what I'm doing for the University of Arkansas, I'm unabashed. I work for the University of Arkansas. That's my job. That's my role. That doesn't mean that I don't appreciate or cannot assist in ways. Sometimes that's if a media member is looking. There's a lot of times that I can't comment officially on some things. But if I have a relationship with the reporter and they're really looking I can help guide them and steer them away from a mistake that would cost them and in the end would not be good for the program or not good for them personally or their media outlet. So sometimes it's the subtle touches that are important and knowing that we're in it together. Very rarely in my 30 years have I come across a media member that I felt like was really trying to just run the Razorbacks down or really trying to agenda. It does happen occasionally, but most of the time it's trying to understand what they're looking for, trying to help them when we can. And when you can't, being honest and just saying, hey, I'd like to help you, I can't. And I think people have generally respected that.
I can speak for me personally. I know I do. You had a daughter, Emma, who went to Oklahoma State. You've got another daughter at the
U of A.
Ellie,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
At the U of A. What's this week like?
Well, it's interesting. Emma had an opportunity to go over to Oklahoma State. I've enjoyed going over to Stillwater. I've gone to a few Bedlam games and enjoyed Oklahoma State. And go for the Pokes any other week except this week. I guarantee you that. But Emma's now, she had a great time, had a great experience at Oklahoma State, worked in athletics. I don't know what her dad did, but she followed me into athletics. But she's blazing her own career. She's actually now at a future opponent, Ole Miss. She's a graduate assistant at Ole Miss in their sports communications department, doing an amazing job. But yes, it's going to be fun to go over to Stillwater. It's amazing. For being so close in proximity that our history is so limited in that, and that goes for Oklahoma as well, other than bowl games. But I think it's a rivalry that could build, or potentially a non-conference setup that could happen. So I'm excited about it. I know Sam was talking about earlier this week how tight those sidelines are, and they are. They're the tightest sidelines, I think, in football. So it's going to be loud. Oklahoma State has a great program. It's a lot of orange. I do have a black Oklahoma State shirt. I did not get an orange one, but to support my daughter. But it's going to be a great game, and looking forward to seeing it.
And was it the equestrian team that she got to be the SID for?
Yeah,
this is a great story, right?
Yeah, so I mentioned how long I've been in this, and I've been fortunate to be part of some wonderful track national championships. Graduated the year we won the '94 basketball national championship, despite one of the assistant coaches. They won it, and I won't say which one Brad done, but. How 52,
younger than you.
52. But so I've worked a lot of years, and championships are hard, right? Championships are hard to come by. So I tell my daughter this. She goes over and she goes to Oklahoma State, and she has her first sport, and she's the lead contact for equestrian. Well, what did they do in her first year? Won the national championship. So one sport, 1 year, 1 ring, right? I'm like, this is not how this works. But she had an opportunity to do that. I was telling Christina, who's been a huge help to Emma along the way and just forging the path. And I've really tried to find women mentors for her in that space because it's a different situation for them, a different experience. And but she's done a number of different sports. But yeah, she got me on it. She rubbed it in 1 year, 1 sport, 1 ring. So
Every January I see you, college football championship game ends, and there you are, like holding the hand of the starting quarterback. You're right there. I mean, kind of explain your role with the playoff and what that's been like working with them and being on the field for these big moments.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate and blessed that our athletic directors through the year have been supportive of me doing some things outside. For those of you of an age to remember the TV show Charlie's Angels, I'm kind of Charlie on the SEC Media Days. You don't really see me, but you hear my voice, right, as I moderate that. I've worked every college football playoff national championship game as a liaison. And in fact, I got lit up the other day. I don't know if anyone's seen the Connor Stallions Netflix, but apparently I'm in the first minute because I'm right behind him at the last national championship game. I've had an opportunity to work with David Warlock, who is a good Arkansas guy and runs the men's basketball Final Four. So the way I see that, one, it's a great opportunity for me personally. I enjoy it, but to represent the University of Arkansas. You look around. There are great representatives of this state and for the university, and so when I have an opportunity to work those events and do that, it helps keep me fresh professionally, and it also allows me to showcase the University of Arkansas in a way that says, hey, I really believe that some of the best people in the country and some of the most skilled people in the country are here in the state of Arkansas, so it's a chance to showcase that.
You also do a lot with the Cotton Bowl, and there's a deep connection, I feel like, with you and the Cotton Bowl. Charlie Fiss and his group. Just speak about that.
Well, when I talk about people that have poured into you, it all started when I was in school here, working for Rick Schaefer, many of you know, and had an opportunity to do that. And golly, I really wanted to work the Southwest Conference basketball tournament. That was going to be like the pinnacle if I could do that. And they were full. And so Charlie Fiss, who is a Springdale native, University of Arkansas graduate, said, hey, I know they're full at the tournament. Would you like to come work the Cotton Bowl? So as a sophomore at the University of Arkansas, I drove down to Dallas, went out into Las Colinas, stayed in the nicest hotel I'd ever seen to that point. They said, here you go. Your job is to get in this car that has 3 miles on it, a brand new car, and drive over to Texas Stadium and write a practice report. And then you come back, and then we'll have an event later tonight. Well, I didn't have to be very old to figure out that was a really good deal, right? And now worked with Charlie over 27 Cotton Bowls. And it's very much like Arkansas. It's a family-oriented, deeply seated thing. Rick Baker has done a tremendous job. They're a member of, obviously, the college football playoff. They're a semifinal this year, and that's going to be, it's going to be weird this year. Obviously, the whole schedule with the CFP, and just to give you an idea, when they will be playing the semifinals this year at the date that we would have played the national championship game this year. So, but it's been a lot of fun to carry on that Arkansas tradition. A lot of Arkansas ties down there, and the Cotton Bowl has been very instrumental. But I was fortunate. The Cotton Bowl lasted a lot longer than the Southwest Conference basketball tournament, so that turned out okay.
Hey, speaking of cars, you drove the getaway car for Dana Altman.
I knew that would come back up. I did drive his. For those of you who don't know, we do provide our head coaches a car. I did pick him up and dropped him off at the office in the morning, and by 4 o'clock I drove him to Drake Field, and he was gone. So he never actually drove his car. It was a nice car. I did not get to keep it, but that's one of those. I've been near him a few times. I don't think we've ever kind of got to visit, but as we pulled in, I think I've told this story before, but as we pulled into Drake Field, they allowed us to pull out onto the tarmac. The plane from Creighton was coming back to pick him up because he had decided to go back to Creighton. And Coach Altman, who's very dry, just very straightforward, said, "Kevin, I'm really sorry this hasn't worked out. If you need to leave me here and drop me off and you can go back, that's fine." I said, "No." I said, "Coach, I'm sorry that this has happened. We'd love to have you, but I'm going to stay here because you're my coach, at least for another 10 minutes. And he kind of looked over and kind of smiled, because what else are you going to say? I mean, it is. I'm going to my biography is going to be called A Lifetime of Awkwardness. That's going to be one of the stories in it. But I haven't spoken to him since. But I'd like to think at least I brought a little levity to a not very funny time.
You had a great hog call.
Yeah, that's right. And how many people told me to make sure that the next coach put on the hat? I've been told that a bunch of times. So we don't do the hat anymore, by the way.
Because this one, I guess I feel like Altman, we can have a little bit more fun with it than maybe we can some of the other situations that you've been through. Frank Broyles had gone to Augusta, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just kind of take us through the background of. I mean, who calls Frank Broyles and says, "Hey, you've got to leave Butler Cabin and come back up and find another basketball"?
And you want to talk about a tough phone call. We had hired Coach Altman, had the press conference on a Monday. We'd gone through the press conference, met some folks. He had gone over to the chancellor's house for dinner. That's where I left him. Coach Broyles was there. Coach Broyles was flying out for Augusta the next morning. So he got up and flew out the next morning. I picked up Coach Altman, as I mentioned, and drove him to Bud Walton Arena, dropped him off, and introduced him to some folks. And, probably 2 hours later, I got a frantic call from the chancellor that said, "You need to get back down there." So at that point, at one point, I had made the call to Coach Broyles in Augusta, and told him that he had to come home because we were going to lose our basketball coach. That was not something he wanted to hear. I wouldn't have wanted to hear that if I were at Augusta, but he came home. Obviously, we went on the search. But yeah, those are kind of the moments. The other duties is a sign that you don't know you're signing up for when you do this business.
And in 2007, so you remember the press conference out back because you were there. It's hard to get word out in 2007 as quickly as it is now. Right. And I think we basically had, you need to be here within 20 minutes. Yeah. Thank goodness the traffic wasn't as bad in Fayetteville as it is now. But, I remember like Bo Mattingly, he'd been out coaching his son's T-ball game. Right. He shows up in a T-shirt and athletic shorts, and he just happened to have some sort of pullover in the back of his SUV that he puts on. They bring their satellite truck out there to meet him. It was really one of the wildest things I think I've covered, probably.
Yeah, and it's like any coaching search. It's not just for the university and the people running the search, but also the people covering the search. When it finally is over, they've introduced the coach. Everybody just gets to relax. During a coaching, there's nothing quite like coaching search season in Arkansas, right? You have people showing up randomly at harps. You have people, whatever. You see Bill Self sightings or whatever it is. But so everyone had kind of relaxed to that point. Clearly, Coach Altman, great coach, went on to have success and go on to Oregon, get to the Final Four. What wasn't a great fit, I think he had a teenage daughter that he told, I think, the morning of the press conference that they were moving to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I think like most 15-year-old daughters, and I've had 2 of them, they're probably saying, "Where are we going?" And so things didn't work out well, but certainly wish him the best. Just one of those chapters in history that we're pretty good about repeating and we're remembering here in Arkansas.
A few more for you. Obviously, your brother Kendall played for the Razorbacks. We were talking about Kendall earlier, and you take credit for his record-long field goal streak.
Well, through 30 years, occasionally, obviously because of the connection and Kendall playing for Coach Hatfield and Coach DeBryan, occasionally I get called Kendall, on a regular occasion, and so I always correct them if they remember a game where he missed a field goal. Now, if they're talking about the Holiday Bowl, he won the game, I'm Kendall, right? No, it was. I joke and I blame. I said if you don't want Kevin Trainor at Arkansas, you can blame Ken Hatfield and Norm DeBryan. My brother was recruited originally on a partial baseball scholarship by Coach DeBryan, and came and walked on. And Lindy, you'll remember this. There were a lot of walk-on kickers. He was one of like 6 kickers in camp that year. It was a walk-on, and after 3 days, he kicked so well, Coach Hatfield gave him a scholarship. And he played some. He'd kicked some in his freshman year. I mentioned the Holiday Bowl. His senior year, though, he was going into it. He had punted and place kicked his junior year. Done okay, but he was just going to concentrate on place kicking. And we were down playing Ole Miss in Little Rock, and Kendall had missed some field goals in the first half, missed several. And, he was so angry that he took off his kicking shoe and he threw it in the trash can, except he didn't hit the trash can. He missed the trash can. And so, of course, as any empathetic brother would do, I yelled, "Hey, you even missed that one wide right." And so he went back in there, went back to the locker room, came back out. Ken Turner probably wasn't as nice as I was, I guarantee you that. Came back out, ended up hitting 24 in a row, a record consecutive field goals. Obviously, that team went on to win the Southwest Conference, had an amazing season. So I guess if I were yelling at my brother, and that's the one time that it paid off and for the Razorbacks and for him.
Hey, real quick, discuss the role of a sport administrator, because I think people hear this and they don't quite understand what you all do. You're the sport admin for volleyball right now. You do baseball as well. Got some baseball stuff for you to confirm here in a minute. But I'm kidding. But you kind of take stuff off of the AD's plate, right? I mean, it keeps the head coach from having to go to Hunter Yurachek or Jeff Long before him and say, hey, I need this. They go to you, and you're kind of an in-between.
Yeah, no, and that's a great way to describe it. As I say, not everything needs to go to the Supreme Court, right? So if a coach is dealing with an issue, our athletic director, Jeff, was kind enough to name me the baseball sport administrator. This is year 14 that I've been with Dave Van Horn, and what a ride that's been. I mean, what a pleasure to work with him day to day. This is year 3 with Jason Watson on volleyball. But really, my goal is to be there in touch with the program every day. Hunter has a large job. He's got a lot of pulls on his time. He's very much involved in our sports and involved in a lot of things. And there are things that need to go to the athletic director. But there's a lot of day-to-day things, whether it's budget, whether it's related to travel and scheduling, whether it's related to just a number of issues that as a sport administrator, my job is to embed with those coaches, embed with those staffs, and really help guide them and provide them support. I'm really a support for them. And, sometimes, obviously, we, just like with the media, sometimes I have to tell them things they don't want to hear. But that's all part of that relationship. Ultimately, like I said, Hunter's very involved with all of our sports. But he's going to first look to the sport administrators to kind of dig into it, get some more information, and try to mitigate. Again, my job is to try to mitigate any issues that we have, whether they're running into issues with different things, and try to help grease the skid so that they can coach their players and be effective.
One of the things that people hate to hear from Kevin is during a baseball game, sir, there's lightning in the area.
That's right.
When you see Kevin step out on the field with his cell phone, you know that you're going to be there for a little while.
That's right.
Kevin, we appreciate you being here, man.
All right. Thank you for having me. Thanks,
All right.
man.
Kevin Trainor, everyone.